The Chicago Bears were supposed to win by 2.5 points in Washington, but the Commanders pulled off the victory anyway. How it all went down, besides just the Hail Mary pass, on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Commander Game Day. Also find me helping WUSA9.com's coverage this season as well. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. Greatly appreciate you coming through today. Everydayers, I appreciate you coming through every day for your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, during which we're going to give out our Week 8 game ball. We're going to keep up the team mentality, and we're going to talk about why that is important for this Washington Commanders team to continue winning. But first, we're going to start it all off with 3 plays that secured the win for the Washington Commanders this Sunday. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. It's our weekly action or after action review, AAR, and we talk about what was supposed to happen, what happened. We identify 3 things we want to see moving forward. We identify 3 things we want to leave behind, and then we give out our game ball since it is a Victory Tuesday episode here of Locked On Commanders. What was supposed to happen? Well, coming into the game, if you remember, the line was actually plus 3.5. The Washington Bears were plus 3.5, which means the Bears were actually favored to win by 3.5 points, even though the Chicago Bears were on the road. Now, Jayden Daniels' rib injury, the fact the Bears were coming off of a bye week certainly probably played into all of that stuff. But when Jayden Daniels was reportedly, it wasn't even actually fully confirmed yet, but when the reports started pouring in on Sunday morning that Jayden Daniels was going to play and was going to start for the Washington Commanders, that line swiftly shifted to Commanders favored by 1. Of course, ultimately, the Washington Commanders ended up winning by 3 with a walk-off Hail Mary from quarterback Jayden Daniels to wide receiver Noah Brown. And as we look at the 3 plays that happened in this game to seal the victory for the Washington Commanders, clearly that Hail Mary is not the only offensive play that contributed to the victory, but certainly the one that stands out the most. So I wanted to look at it and get a little bit deeper into it. It's more than just a throw the football up, hopefully somebody catches it type of thing, right? We've heard Dan Quinn, Jayden Daniels, Noah Brown, Terry McLaurin all talk about how they practice these things. They practice them offensively, they practice them defensively. And really what it's given us is this opportunity to get a really good look into the preparation of a football team, because the Washington Commanders aren't the only team that practices this type of a drill. In fact, the Chicago Bears actually practice this type of drill. And cornerback Tyreek Stevenson, who has since apologized for his actions on the field to Bears fans, to Chicago Bears themselves. Don't expect him to apologize to Commanders fans, because quite honestly, he's got nothing to apologize for, because he essentially already gave Commanders fans the gift of messing up so bad that he has a direct hand in the Washington Commanders winning this game. Because of his antics, he's supposed to be boxing out Noah Brown, but instead he inserts himself in the scrum, jumping up for that ball. And when he gets batted in the air, he's nowhere near Noah Brown to try to defend it. If he's boxing out Noah Brown like he's supposed to be, he's actually between Noah Brown and the ball, and he can bat it down or out of the way, and the Bears actually win that game. So he doesn't really owe the Commanders an apology. He owed the Bears and Bears fans an apology. He's given it. So I think we can move on. That's going to be a moment that follows him for a very long time. So I think we can let him just kind of wallow in that misery. And as you know, human beings, I wish him well and hope that he has a very good career, because he is a very talented guy. If you go back to when he came out of the draft, I actually wanted Washington to select him. So the Chicago Bears prepare for this thing. The Washington Commanders prepare for this thing. But how does this really go down? Because in the stands, in the press box, and I'm sure in some people's living rooms and sports bars, there were people who were getting a little bit frustrated in how long Jayden Daniels held the ball. According to NFL Next Gen Stats, the longest a quarterback has held a football for a touchdown pass since Next Gen Stats started tracking how long quarterbacks hold footballs before they throw the ball. So that's how long Jayden Daniels threw the ball. And I know that I heard somebody in the press box as Jayden Daniels was rolling to the right and getting ready to roll back to the left say, throw the ball. And I could feel the tension in the stands. People were like, dude, we're not going to have a quarterback sack to end this game, because that's the worst way to end any football game, right? But think about how this has to happen. If you were one of those people And it's okay if you were, because I think it's a very natural thing, especially in the moment. 12 seconds feels like 12 minutes. But I wanted to look at this because I wanted to really break down what this really takes. When you look at the combine, the NFL scouting combine 40 times for all the receivers that the Washington Commanders had on the field. Terry McLaurin ran a 4.35. Christian McCaffrey, look at me. Luke McCaffrey ran a 4.46. Noah Brown ran a 4.56. Zach Ertz ran a 4.76. That's in underwear. That's the first or second maybe run that you have of the day. This is at the end of a game, wearing pads. You're exhausted. And let's be quite honest with you. You all have in the back of your mind, this probably isn't going to work out. So it's going to take you much longer than the 4.35, 4.46, 4.56, 4.76 to get down the field. On average, quarterbacks expect to get about 2.5 seconds before they have to throw the ball. And the Chicago Bears only brought 3 rushers, but they were still bringing rushers, right? The line of scrimmage was at the Washington 48. So you're 52 yards from the end zone line, from the goal line. So you've got to run longer than the 40 yards. It's the end of a game. You're wearing pads. So it's going to take you much longer than the 4.35, 4.46, all that stuff, right? And when Jayden gets to the top of his drop, so when you talk about quarterbacks throwing on rhythm, what you mean is they get to the top of their drop, and usually that first hitch up is when they're throwing the ball. That's kind of the ideal rhythm for a quarterback. It doesn't happen all that often, but that's the ideal rhythm, right? When Jayden Daniels gets to the top of his drop, the furthest receiver downfield is Luke McCaffrey, and he is at the Chicago 31-yard line. So we're still 31 yards from the closest receiver even being to the goal line yet. Now, Noah Brown is the first to reach the goal line. By the time he gets to the goal line, Jayden is already rolled right. He's already on his way to the right side of the field. I think everyone is basically expecting him to throw at that point because he did have some space in front of him to step into it. But the Bears secondary is also incredibly spread out across the end zone. And there's 3 guys at the deep part of the end zone, 4 between the 5 and the goal line. So not a very good situation to throw the ball into if you're Jayden Daniels. So Jayden holds it. Now, he said he didn't really see, quote unquote, anything. He just kind of felt that he shouldn't throw the ball yet. But I think that seeing, right, those defenders spread out like that told his brain, hey, bro, not the right time. So he takes off to the left. Terry McLaurin actually ends up running back towards Jayden Daniels a little bit. Now, Terry is supposed to be the front side receiver in case the ball gets deflected back into the field of play. But I don't know that he's supposed to be that far up. He actually ends up running out to the Chicago 10-yard line and takes 2 Bears defenders with him, which I think is incredibly important because that's 2 fewer defenders to try to knock that ball down or get in the way of it. Now, at the same time, the other Bears defenders start flattening out. That is when Jayden Daniels delivers the ball. And essentially, when he delivers the ball, Bears defenders, Commanders receivers are essentially all on the same plane if you draw like a line across the end zone. So you end up with Terry underneath pulling 2 defenders out of the picture. Ertz and McCaffrey are in the scrum with 5 Bears defenders. Should have only been 4 because remember, Tyreek Stevenson should have been back where Noah Brown was, and Noah Brown was left all alone in the back of the pile for Washington. There's 3 out of 6 directions this ball can go where it's successful for the Bears. 3 out of 6 where it can go where it's successful for the Commanders. If it goes left, right, or down, the Bears win. If it goes forward, backwards, or up, the Commanders win. Because even if it goes forward or backward, depending on how you want to direct it, but even if it goes towards Terry McLaurin into the field of play, the Chicago Bears defenders on the other side of the play are actually in the wrong position too. They're outside of Terry. They're not between Terry and the ball. They're outside of Terry. So Terry gets that ball, he's going to run right into the end zone with it. So it's a turn. So what the Commanders were able to do is turn that into a 50-50 proposition, which is the best you can do in a Hail Mary. So I want to get into the details of how that really broke down because it's not as simple as drop back, hurl the ball downfield, and hope it works out. There was actually a lot of nuance to that play. Defensively, I think the fumble recovery and the sack, which at the time of this recording, Johnny Newton actually does not have an official sack recorded. The NFL called that sack that Johnny Newton got in the beginning of the game on Caleb Williams. They actually called that a quarterback run. It's not a quarterback run. It's clearly a pass play. So I'm hoping the NFL is going to reverse that by Wednesday morning, which is when NFL stats go final. But on the fumble recovery, even if Doug Kramer, the center who they're putting at fullback, holds on to the handoff, both Fedarian Mathis and Johnny Newton are pinching down into the right side A gap where the Bears were trying to push that ball. So again, you obviously want the fumble, but even if there's no fumble there, Fedarian Mathis, Johnny Newton are actually filling that gap. Anyway, Bears fans are calling for offensive coordinator Shane Waldron to be fired after that play. Bears wide receiver DJ Moore said after the game, quote, "I don't know the reason behind the play call. It's been up for a few weeks, but I didn't think we were actually going to get it called in a game like this," end quote. Not good. Not good. Special teams, the fumble recovery by Jeremy McNichols in the very early stage of the game, the very first punt of the game. Olamide Zaccheaus fumbles the punt return at the Washington 33. There are two Bears defenders upright, right? Not so two Bears defenders collide on OZ, but there are two Bears defenders standing upright in position to make a play on that fumble. Jeremy McNichols is the one Commanders player there. He jumps on the ball. But I think if you go back and watch that play, notice Jeremy McNichols, as OZ is getting tackled, he's actually ready in case that ball squirts out. Not because he doubts his teammate, but because that is what this team's prepared to do. They're prepared to play, to respond in any situation. That is the marquee of a very effective team, very effective coaching. That is what happened to get this Washington Commanders their sixth win of the season. What do we want to sustain moving forward? What do we want to improve? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. And with FanDuel, you can get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Maybe a quarterback started off slow, but you still think he's going to hit the over on a certain amount of passing yards. You can make that bet. And not only that, but you can view live play-by-play. You can get the latest stats in that game for that quarterback, all at FanDuel, the same place you can place that bet. Or if you want to make your bets before the game, you can look at a line like the Washington Commanders, who are 3.5-point favorites on the road next week against the New York Giants. You do what you're going to do. Go to FanDuel.com. Join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bets. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Continuing now, today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. If you want to get even more out of the program, all you got to do is become a Locked On Commanders insider. To do that, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you can send me your text. I will send you my text. You'll get inside information, exclusive content, analysis, access to me, including invitations to our insider exclusive Zoom conferences. A lot of good people coming through there. We've got a very good staff of regulars that come through the Zoom calls, but we have people coming through every week giving it a try. Even if you can only come for a couple minutes, just say, hey, what's up? Celebrate with people who are celebrating. Do what you got to do, and you can duck out. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try becoming an insider for free for the first 2 weeks. Hopefully you come through. Sustain and improve. We call it stash and trash on commandergameday.com, but here we call them sustains and improves because that's what they're actually called when you're doing an AAR. So we've got 3 sustains. We've got 3 improves, and we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to do our 3 sustains. Then we're going to do our 3 improves coming out of week 8. That's not typically how we do this, but we're going to do that way this week. So number 1, our first sustain. And look, our sustains are anytime, anywhere, anybody. And yes, it's a little bit cheesy. And yes, I stole it from the Washington Commanders. They actually have that painted on their wall. Now, the way they have that painted on their wall is anybody, anywhere, anytime. But I wanted to start backwards. So we're going to go in reverse order. Either way, the meaning is the same. The Commanders dominated the Chicago Bears for all about 80% of this contest, no matter what Adam Rank thinks. Then, as anybody watching the game unfold would predict, push came to shove because the Washington Commanders weren't putting touchdowns on the board. Instead, they were putting field goals on the board. It left the Chicago Bears available to come back in that game, and comeback is eventually exactly what they did. They end up, the Washington Commanders, trailing with just seconds left. They had 1 timeout left coming into that final drive, and I think 25 seconds left on the clock, less than that after the kickoff return. And essentially, you had 2 choices: fight to the end, and maybe you still lose, or roll over, play dead, get ready for week 9, and you definitely lose. Well, they picked the option of fighting. Even though there's very little time left on the clock, they picked the first option. With no time left on the clock, Jayden Daniels, receiver, Noah Brown connect on the ultimate, what I'm calling the ultimate new era of Washington football play, right? We hear from Jeremy Reaves. We heard from Terry McLaurin. You hear from a lot of people who were part of this team going back years. And they all said to a man, this never would have happened with previous teams. 2 years ago, this would not have happened. When you talk about, has Washington really turned a page? I think this is the play so far this season that you look at to say, yes, they've absolutely turned a page. This is a totally new different team. And I think everybody understood that already. But again, this is the play. If you need evidence, if you are somebody out there who's still on the fence, this is the play, because you know as well as anybody else does, This doesn't happen to previous versions of this Washington team. So there you go. Number 2, anywhere. Just over a year ago on the same exact field, though under a different sponsor name, against the same franchise, the Chicago Bears, Commanders safety Jeremy Reaves tore his ACL. Immediately, the future of the team captain and a first-team All-Pro specialist came into question. We all wondered, has Jeremy Reaves played his last snap for the Washington Commanders? Because we all felt that there was change coming, right? All season long, we talked about, would Ron Rivera get fired in season? Would there be a head coaching search in season? All this stuff. After living through this win, Reaves shared his emotion. He admitted again that the teams in the past probably wouldn't have pulled this off, but it meant something different for him because it's the same field. It's a little over a year. It's the same opponent. So for Jeremy Reaves, a very, very real living of, man, things have really changed. I wrote an article recently for WSA9.com talking about all the changes that Sam Cosmi's life has gone through over the last 10 months. Jeremy Reaves' life has gone through a lot of changes as well over the last 12 months. And this game really kind of put a bow on just how far, not just Reaves, but everybody has come in that time in the exact same place where it's kind of one of the worst moments of the last regime, right? Number 3, anybody. Noah Brown, the recipient of the tip ball Hail Mary throw, did not have a great game. If you're being completely honest with it, did not have a great game. Had a really great moment, did not have a great game. He was targeted 6 times, only brought in 3 of those, which means outside the Hail Mary, he was targeted 5 times, only brought in 2 of those. Before that final play, Brown had 2 catches for 21 yards. What made it a quote-unquote bad outing for him was the drop that he had earlier in the game. Now, the Washington Commanders end up picking up the first down after the drop. They end up getting a field goal after the drop, all of those things. So in a certain way, you can kind of call it no harm, no foul. But when you talk about Noah Brown, the way that we've been talking about him recently, which is he's kind of that best number 2 option, this is the kind of game where you're having red zone struggles, you're having some penalty struggles, you're up against a really good defense. You got to bring these balls in. He was wide open, found a wide open spot in the Chicago Bears zone defense, had that really bad drop. Dan Quinn talked about it in his Monday Zoom conference with us. Austin Eckler also had a drop earlier, but when it mattered most, Noah Brown stepped up, made the play. He was where he needed to be, regardless of the situation, regardless of how the night had gone for him personally. He was where he needed to be when his team needed him to be there, made the play. And although it's not credited, Johnny Newton, again, talk about people, rookie, struggled to get even on the field, right? Had that second foot surgery right after he was drafted, had to miss a good part of his offseason conditioning program, had to work his way on the field, get the reps, then stepping up for an injured Jonathan Allen, which I know a lot of people have become disenfranchised with Jonathan Allen as of late. But either way, when you're stepping up for a guy like John Allen, there's a lot of eyes on you. There's a lot of pressure on you. So Johnny Newton also stepping up as well, in spite of the circumstances. So again, anybody is our final sustain of the week. Our 3 improves: laundry service, penalties coming up again. Penalties were an issue a couple weeks ago. They were an issue against the New York Giants, which makes this a little bit more impactful this week that we see all these penalties happening that are undoing scoring opportunities or hurting scoring opportunities, because you just saw this against the New York Giants. This absolutely has to get cleaned up. Dan Quinn kind of reiterated what he's always said. The heat of the battle penalties, you can live with those. It's the pre-snap, it's the post-snap penalties that you can't live with. Those things have got to get cleaned up before the team heads to New Jersey this weekend, because, again, you're facing the New York Giants team. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday night, actually. The Steelers kind of did the same thing. They messed around, let the Giants hang in the game, and they came out with the win, just like the Washington Commanders did, but there were some very nervous moments there at the end of that contest. Number 2, left tackle instability, and this is less something that the team can just grab a hold of and say, we're going to fix this, more so of a circumstance they find themselves into. Brandon Coleman, rookie left tackle, had to miss the game due to a concussion, still in concussion protocol. We'll see how his recovery goes this week on whether or not he'll be available against the New York Giants. That becomes all the more important because veteran Cornelius Lucas, who has been swapping reps with Brandon Coleman all season, obviously got the start against the Chicago Bears, played the bulk of the snaps up until he injured his ankle. After the game, we saw him wearing a boots that's been reported publicly, so we'll talk about it here, on the affected foot. Trent Scott came in, and as you would expect, your 3rd left tackle in the rotation. There were some good moments. There were some bad moments. There were some up and down moments. As Scott has played more, and as he gets a week of practice in him with a little bit higher expectation that he might actually be playing, hopefully it'll be better when they head into MetLife Stadium. But you're hoping that either Cornelius Lucas or Brandon Coleman is capable of playing next Sunday, because even if you go in there with Trent Scott and say, okay, well, he's better prepared this week than he was last week, if he goes down, you really start getting thin. I mean, you're already thin, but you really start getting into trouble as an offensive line. Number 3, red zone inefficiency. Basically the same thing we saw against the New York Giants in week 2. We saw this week. The Washington Commanders get into the red zone 3 times. Against Chicago Bears, they get 9 points in those 3 trips. You need to get at least 13 points in those 3 trips, if not 17 points in those 3 trips, if not 21 points in those 3 trips. We saw the same song and dance against New York Giants. That is the opponent that is up next. So you definitely want to see them exercise those demons before you enter into week 9, or else you're going to let the New York Giants hang around just like you did the Chicago Bears. So those are things we want to keep. Those are the things we want to clean up heading into week 9. Now, we get to celebrate just a little bit more here on this Victory Tuesday. Who gets the fan-voted game ball? We got a lot of recipients getting votes. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks to our friends over at Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend your time wisely to improve yourself? Well, you've got history, economics, you got great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. This time of year, that's pretty important. Did you study those things in school? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe if you even did, you don't necessarily remember and you haven't necessarily retained everything you got from it. So maybe you need a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. And our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including American Foreign Policy, the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, the history of classical music, and more. So go to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll today. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. Again, that's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to get started. hillsdale.edu/locked-on. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. I didn't win all of my entries, but I did win and hit on a $60 entry where I had 2 entries. I only had 2 guys. It was Brian Robinson Jr. and Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback Russell Wilson. They both hit the more than on their stat lines that I picked. So I won $60 for that 2-player entry. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. So sign up today and get a $50 bonus instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So if you think you know that a player will get more than or less than on certain stat projections, build up your team, 2 to 6 players, win up to 100 times your money with up to 4 selections. Cook up your hot takes, win real money this football season. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get that $50 bonus instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. Run your game. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, and we're going to look at some notes. We typically go through some Dan Quinn quotes, or one quote at least here. And a lot of the quotes are about the Hail Mary. And look, we love the Hail Mary. We talked a lot about the Hail Mary, but I think it's kind of time to start turning the page because there is another opponent coming up. So let's look at some of the other things that the Washington Commanders achieved in this last game. So this is all from the team. The team puts out these really interesting stats every week, and we really appreciate them for doing so. But they said that Washington's held their opponent scoreless in the first half in consecutive games for the first time since week 10 and 11 of the 1997 season. So again, if you feel like you're seeing Commanders football that you haven't seen in a long time or ever, it's because you have. Washington is 4-0 at home for the first time since 2005 and is 6-2 to start the season for the first time since 2008. They've also recorded 481 net yards, the highest total of the season in this last week's game against the Chicago Bears. And Washington's defense held Chicago to 2 of 12 on third down. Jayden Daniels completed 21 of 38 passes for 326 yards, surpassed 300 plus passing yards in a single game for the first time in his career. So congratulations to Jayden for doing that. He is the second quarterback in franchise history to have 400 plus rushing yards in a single season. And we're literally not even halfway through. Halftime of the Giants game will be technically halfway through the season. Jayden Daniels' 51-yard touchdown pass at the end of the game, I thought it was 52, 51. Either way, was the longest of his career. And Terry McLaurin had 5 catches, the highest mark of the season so far. He also passed wide receiver Ricky Sanders for 7th on the franchise's all-time reception list. Also passed Sanders for 6th all-time in receiving yards. Noah Brown caught a history pass for 73 yards and the touchdown. Zach Ertz, 7 receptions, 77 yards, certainly a career mark for him in some ways. Brian Robinson led the team in 65 yards rushing. Defensive tackle Daron Payne, defensive end Jalen Holmes, each recorded their first sacks of the season. Johnny Newton should be getting his first sack of the season. Do the right thing, NFL. Tress Way recorded his 280th punt inside the 20-yard line since entering the league in 2014. Way is second in the NFL win punts inside the 20-yard line, which is why everybody loves him. And kicker Austin Seibert has 23 total made field goals right now, which is the most by a Commanders kicker through the first 8 weeks of an NFL season ever. That is pretty amazing, considering that Austin Seibert is the 5th shot at getting the kicking position right for the Washington Commanders. So congratulations to Austin Seibert. Of course, so every Victory Tuesday, we also have our game ball. And looking at our YouTube vote, our community poll, we have Jayden Daniels taking 70% of the vote for the fan-voted game ball. So Jayden Daniels getting the win there. When we look at our insiders were much more split. Jayden Daniels was one of the top vote getters, but he was not the top vote getter. The actual top vote getter was wide receiver Noah Brown. Jayden Daniels got second most votes along with Johnny Newton. So fans certainly giving a hat tip to Johnny Newton. The defense as a whole got a couple of votes, and I like that idea. Although if the game ball was real, we would have to like split it up between like 30 dudes. That'd be kind of like, here's your piece of game ball. But I like the imagery of it. Fans got a vote, and you know what? I like that because I very cheesily, I don't know if that's a word, but in my post-game episode, I gave the fans the 3rd star of the game. I thought it was prudent. Jeremy McNichols for his fumble recovery got a vote. So I'm happy to see an insider giving a hat tip to there. Football in general got a vote, which I think, football is great. Football is the best game ever invented. So I support that. Austin Seibert got some love. Zach Ertz got some love. And Chicago Bears cornerback Tyreek Stevenson got multiple votes from insiders. So we got some insiders sending zingers out there. On the YouTube vote, Noah Brown was second with 18% of the vote. Johnny Newton, 10% of the vote. Zach Ertz got 2% of the vote. And we did have some comments of some people saying, man, like, I want to say the whole team. I want to say the whole defense. Dr. Wonderful, one of our insiders, commented on our YouTube vote. So insiders crossing over to our YouTube community as well. So where's the button for all? Certainly a vote this week that was harder than usual. But that means that you have a team that is doing well on all kinds of different levels, even though they had to win in last-second fashion. So a lot of fun there. Coming up next, we are going to do a little bit more deep diving into some specifics of this last game, and we're going to turn the page towards the New York Giants with our introductory New York Giants study. So come back for that. If you have any questions or comments in the meantime, just send me a text message. To do that, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL. In the morning, Madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through the way that you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.